எதன் கண்ணே நிலையாகி இருந்திடும் உலகமெல்லாம் எதனதெல்லாம் எதனின்றும் அனைத்துலகும் எழுமோ மற்றிவையாவும் எதன் பொருட்டாம் எதனாலும் வையமெல்லாம் எழுந்திடும் எல்லாமும் எதுவே ஆகும். அதுதானே உலகுருளாம் சத்தியமாம் அச்சொருபம் அகத்தில் வைப்பான். ஆதலினால் அறிவுமயமாம் சுத்த இதயத்தே அகத்தை சேர்க்கும். சாதனையால் வாதனைகள் ஒடுவாயு ஒடுக்கமுமே சாரும் தானே. ஆதலினால் அறிவுமயமாம் சுத்த இதயத்தே அகத்தை சேர்க்கும். சாதனையால் வாதனைகள் ஒடுவாயு ஒடுக்கமுமே சாரும் தானே. Namo Ramana. With Bhagavan's immense grace, in the Upasana Prakarana, in the segment dedicated for worship of the self, we have come to verse number 24, which could have been added to 23 and we could have read them together. But because this is focused on the sadhana and the earlier verses were leading up to this as description of the Hridayam, which is quite important in itself because it brought us to the Dahara Vidya of Chandogya Upanishad. And this verse focuses exclusively on the sadhana portion. One more verse is there from Devi Kalotram, the next one, 25th, which is also addressing the sadhana from a slightly different perspective, from the perspective of upadhis. Then 26 and 27 are practice in day-to-day life given by Vasishta Muni to Rama once again. So we have this verse from Yoga Vasishtam, the 24, completing the sadhana. What exactly is the sadhana? Then we have verse number 25 from Devi Kalotram, which will take us to the same heart, but with a different emphasis on the way in which the heart is accessed. Then 26 and 27 are instructions or the Upadesham from Vasishta Muni to Rama, how to hold the Nishtha even in active day-to-day life. So that will be interesting from the perspective of self-inquiry in day-to-day living, those two verses. But right now, we are going into the heart of the Upasana Prakarana, verse number 24. Vasishta concluded. So the earlier verses have been referred to as leading up to this, and this is the conclusion. Therefore, by the practice sadhana of fixing the mind in the pure heart, which is of the nature of consciousness, the subsidence of breath, along with the tendencies, vasanas, will be accomplished automatically. So I'll read that. Adalina அறிவுமய மாம் சுத்த இதயத்தே அகத்தை சேர்க்கும். ஆதலினால் Arivumaya Mam Sutta Idayatte Ahatte Serkum. Therefore, as we have been shown the importance of the spiritual heart, and that all the worlds are contained in it, all knowledge, all wealth, all health is contained in it. Therefore, it is very important to go and find out what is the spiritual heart and not worry about the physical heart, which of course does its part. This verse leading on, taking the lead from those verses, concludes as, therefore, Adalinal Arivumaya Mam Sutta Idayate, that which is full of consciousness, that which is complete and perfect with undivided, unbroken consciousness, in that heart, Sutta Idayate, in that pure heart, Ahattai Serkum. Bhagavan uses the word Aham here itself, whereas the commentators, both Kanakamal and Lakshman Sharmaji, whom we have been referring to, they use the word mind. Ahattai, Aham is the I or the ego. That is the word used by Bhagavan. Idayatte Ahattai Serkum. To take the I or the ego to the pure consciousness, which is the heart, is the word used by Bhagavan. But both the commentators and Sadhuvam Swamigal also in his translation, all the three of them together use the word taking the mind to the heart. So that is because the word used in the original, work, Yoga Vasishtam, is Chitta, is Chittam. So the commentators have stayed true to the Sanskrit and have translated it as mind. But we can also see the importance of Bhagavan using the word Aham, Ahattai Serkum from the perspective of self-enquiry. More about this as we go into the verse. But the word used by Bhagavan is Ahattai Serkum. Adalina Arivumaya Mam Sutta Idayatte Ahattai Serkum Sadhanayal. The word used by Sadhuvam Swamigal is therefore, by the practice of fixing the mind in the pure heart, in the Suddha Idayatte Serkum Sadhanayal, Vadanaigal Oduvayu Odukamume. Vadanaigal is Vasanas, Odu also, along with Vasanas, Vayu Odukamume. The subsidence of breath will also happen or will also be attained Tane, automatically, if one takes the mind, the Chittam, to the heart, the Dahara Akasha, the pure consciousness, the undivided consciousness, then the destruction of vasanas and the subsidence of breath will happen automatically. A simple enough verse, but we have some understanding to do about how Yoga Vasishtam refers to the meditation on the heart. The meditation on the heart is referred to as the Dahara Vidya in Chandogya Upanishad. We saw that already. Whereas Bhagavan's teaching is Atma Ucharan, and it is perhaps an appropriate moment in our journey in this holy work to connect the two and to see how Bhagavan given sadhana of Atma Ucharan is direct and helpful to us. Therefore, we take up the comparison of meditation and self-inquiry given by Bhagavan. Here in Yoga Vasishtam, as in Chandogya Upanishad, the sadhaka is asked to meditate on the inner space, In that meditation itself, the mind gets merged into that source. Therefore, the source is treated as apart from the I, and the I or the mind is merged with that. So that is the meditation that is taught. What does Bhagavan consider as the comparison between meditation on the heart and self-inquiry? We directly have his own words in talk number 131. I'll read that. The questioner asks, there are said to be 6 organs of different colors in the chest. So that was how we began the verses. Idayamalar Bugayahamai, Epperunkan Nadiyin Kolatakadum Talatakadumam Ivirandin Kurukelai Alatakam Udambinmar Bahator Idat Idayamana Amainda Angam Alatakka Dor Arivakara Idayam Kolatakadam Endru Ramanukku Vasishta Muni Serpugindran. That Kollatakka Hridayam is what is covered here. There are said to be 6 organs of different colors in the chest, of which the heart is said to be 2 finger breadths to the right of the middle line. But the heart is also formless. Should we then imagine it to have a shape and meditate on it? Should we imagine the lily bud inverted with a hole, and that hole leading to the Dahara Akasha, the small space which is exactly identical with the large space, that is the Brahman. As the immanent God is one with the transcendent God, Bhagavan says, no. Should we meditate on the space? Bhagavan says, no. Only the quest, who am I, is necessary. What remains all through deep sleep and waking is the same. But in waking, there is the unhappiness and the effort to remove it. Asked, who wakes up from sleep? You say, I. Now, you are told to hold fast to this I. If it is done, the eternal being will reveal itself. Investigation of I is the point, and not meditation on the heart center. There is nothing like within or without. Both mean either the same thing or nothing. That is the first part. Then Bhagavan covers what is this meditation on the heart center. Of course, there is also the practice of meditation on the heart center. It is only a practice. It is a meditational practice and not vichara, not investigation. Only the one who meditates on the heart can remain aware when the mind ceases to be active and remains still. Whereas those who meditate on other centers cannot be so aware and infer that the mind was still only after it becomes active again. Now, Bhagavan is giving us a detail about the when samai, the Dahara Akasha meditation. When we do meditation on that space, what happens is what Bhagavan says. We have seen earlier that there are other centers on which the meditation can be fixed, like Sahasrara or the other chakras. What Bhagavan is saying is an important part of knowledge that we need to have, that while meditating on the other centers, suppose we have picked up the meditation on, let us say, the chakra, Sahasrara chakra or the Ajna chakra. What Bhagavan is saying here is that when the stillness of mind or the mind absorbed in the heart comes, one will not have awareness of it when you are meditating on the other centers. Only if you are meditating on the Dahara Akasha, one will retain awareness when the mind is completely absorbed in the self. If you are meditating in the other centers, we will not be aware of the mind getting absorbed. Only when a time period of absorption is there and the mind gets active again, because there was this gap and quietness and an equality with deep sleep, one will be able to infer that one was in samadhi, says Bhagavan. Now, it may appear that the meditation and self-inquiry, the difference when we look into it is that in meditation, during the practice of meditation of the Dharakasha, the I is retained, the ego is retained, and it merges into the source and comes back again. Whereas the practice in who am I is that the I is stilled. The I is completely stilled as it is dropping the thought. Now, what happens in this situation is that there are two things where self-inquiry is more direct and helpful than meditation. One is in meditation, since the I is retained, the I can have this problem of mistaking subtle thoughts, very subtle movement of the vasanas as samadhi itself, and may get into the judgmental mode, feeling, because those are all very subtle thoughts, the experience of that will be very close to the samadhi sthiti. So there is one possibility into which I had spent some time, so that's why I am disclosing that there may be in the meditation of the heart center, the thought-free state, one retains the ego, and there was a time when I had the experience of the thought-free state, the thought-free consciousness, but since the ego was still around, I used to claim that that thought-free state is mine, that I am thought-free, why are you not, why are you? So, so the ego was very much there because it was judgmental of others, and also it claimed the heart or the thought-free consciousness for its own. Whereas that is one thing. And Bhagavan brings us to another point in meditation is that one can get into the nirvikalpa state and just go into laya for some periods of time. I will read that from talk number 76. That is when meditating. In deep sleep, the mind, this is talk number 76, how Bhagavan opens us to the possibility of one more slip up other than claiming falsely the heart or the thought-free consciousness with the ego. That's one thing from experience I am saying. Here Bhagavan is introducing the other possibility. In deep sleep, mind is merged and not destroyed. That which merges reappears. So that which is destroyed doesn't reappear. The yogi's aim must be to destroy the mind and not to sink in laya. In the peace of dhyana, laya ensues, but it is not enough. It must be supplemented by other practices for destroying the mind. Destroying the mind is the vasana kshaya, the thing that will happen automatically, that was referred to. Now comes the Bhagavan's caution. Bhagavan says, some people go into samadhi with a trifling thought, and after a long time awakened in the trail of the same thought. In the meantime, generations have passed away in the world. Such a yogi has not destroyed his mind. Its destruction is the non-recognition of it as being apart from the self. Even now the mind is not recognized it. So that is how Bhagavan cautions us with the meditational aspect, that in meditation one can sometimes slip into laya because the ego is not still directly. The ego is still alive, and one may mistake a laya. The yogi's example Bhagavan gives is a yogi is said to have gone into this laya after having asked his shishya to get a cup of water, and that laya he gets up after 1,000 years. 1,000 years in this world has passed, And the first thought that comes to him is, where are you? Get me that cup of water. So with a trifling thought he goes, and from that we get the offshoot of why Bhagavan tells Kunju Swami, go to sleep with the Atma Vichara being done. So that will be the first thought when you get up also. So consciously go to deep sleep after doing Atma Vichara. Just like that yogi, after 1000 years, the first thought was, get me the cup of water. As soon as we get up from Laya, the first thought will be of self, is what Kunju Swami was instructed by Bhagavan. But these are the 2 points which make the difference between meditation and the self-enquiry. And the reason why Bhagavan uses the word aham, though the word chittam is used, is perhaps, though the commentators have taken the correct route of safe treatment of the original work from Yoga Vasishtam, I would suggest that here, Adalina Harivamaya Mam Sutta Idayate Ahatte Sirkum, we can treat it as Bhagavan is suggesting self-enquiry only in this verse also. The other point that comes up, other than the difference between meditation and self-enquiry, is that in the Dahara Akasha, when we take up the studies from the Visishta Advaitam and Advaitam, if we take, this is the place where even the Visishta Advaitins, they say that the individual starts merging into the Paraman, or they give the explanation that the small whole refers to the Jiva and the large consciousness into which it merges refers to the Paramatman. But they are also agreed that this is the place where the individuality merges into the universal. So, of course, Dvaita, I haven't listened to the commentary, but it must be that individuality remains individuality. But the indication is that one has to lose the individuality there and merge into the universal. And Bhagavan assures many a time that the same work that you were doing, instead of the ego taking care of it, with the support of the universal, there will be a clear consciousness that it is only the universal which is taking care of everything. But this point that the loss of individuality in the Dahara Akasha, it has been addressed many a time by Bhagavan in both day-to-day as well as in talks. But I am more comfortable with talks, so I will keep referring to that. You will find Bhagavan's teachings commonly present in the works that have been taken down by Surinagama in letters, by Devraj Budliar in day-to-day, and by Munagal Venkatramaniya in the talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. But this point, that this is the exact point of meditation on Dahara Akasha or on self-enquiry, that the ego or the individuality has to be surrendered to the universal. Now, that is why earlier some of these sadhanas were taught only to those who have taken sannyasa. Those who have, the ashrama itself was meant for those people who have. But how Bhagavan has extended that to all of us is that since the prarabdha is the one that determines the actions, and the prarabdha is in Ishvara's control, and Ishvara is always present where prarabdha is playing itself. Ishvara can never be absent. And Ishvara's real Swarupa, we saw in the previous session that Ishvara's real Swarupa is also the self. Therefore, these vidyas are now opened up by Bhagavan for all. How he opens up is that he says that a man, talk number 427, is it necessary to take sannyasa for self-realization? Maharishi, sannyasa is to renounce one's individuality. we will see how Rama is instructed when we take up verses 26 and 27, how Rama is instructed to carry out the Dahara or abidance in the self while actively engaged in the world, while performing his duties. So therefore, Bhagavan is taking us through self-inquiry to those instructions given by Vasishtha Muni to Rama. Now he takes us to those instructions again and again in the talks. One such talk is talk number 427. Is it necessary to take sannyasa for self-realization? Bhagavan, sannyasa is to renounce one's individuality. This is not the same as tonsure and ochre robes. A man may be a grihi, yet if he does not think he is a grihi, he is a sannyasi. On the contrary, a man may wear ochre robes and wander about. Yet if he thinks he is a sannyasi, he is not that. To think of sannyasa defeats its own purpose. So therefore, Bhagavan takes us to the laws of individuality irrespective of our prarabdha. And we should recall the greatness of this teaching when we this was read out to me from the biographical notes about Chidanandji in Shivananda Ashram. It was read out to me by one of the residents of Ashram from the bookstall, one of the monks. So it appears Chidanandji had joined the Shivananda Ashram, but there was this practice there that the sannyasa diksha will be given on Shivaratri days, but one has to voluntarily take that. One has to go and submit oneself, I feel I am ready. It appears for many years, Chidanandji wouldn't opt, he had probably out of humility or whatever, he wouldn't go and submit himself, say that I am ready for this. And one particular previous to Shivaratri day, it appears Shivanand Maharaj, he actually bemoans the situation. He says, probably in this Janma, it is not his prarabdha to take. I don't know why he is doing like that. That Shivaratri day, he submits himself and gets his sannyasa. Why I am saying this is, it is treated so seriously by the great ones in their path to self-realization, and such a thing Bhagavan is opening up for us. Irrespective of the duties we have, we can go to the self, abide in it as the self when we take up the self-inquiry, because the same work, whatever is the body has come to do in this world, what has been fixed by Ishvara, the same work will be done by the Ishvara Shakti itself, where the ego is absent. Bhagavan says, you need not worry how the duties will go on. That worry is a very laughable thing which the ego does as though it is doing. The more clearly it sees God's hands, the more clearly it will know that it has done nothing at any point of time. But that is the opening up of the path which was very specially taught to everyone to go into the Dahara Akasha, holding the self-inquiry or directly meditating on it. Now, how to do this, we can briefly look at it before we go into talk number 26, the verse number 26 and 27, where Rama is instructed how in day-to-day living this self-inquiry or Dahara Kasha is practiced, where Prarabdha is there to do the work. Now, interestingly enough, even sannyasis or who have taken near to monkhood like Kunju Swami and the Jnani in Bhagavan, they would be sitting and cutting vegetables in the morning. And Kunju Swami, who is the practitioner of self-inquiry, will be anxiously looking at the clock while cutting the vegetables. So Bhagavan will ask, after some time he will ask, why are you looking at the clock? And Kunju Swami will say, I was feeling that this time I could have been in the meditation hall doing Atma Ucharam. I am only paraphrasing. This is there in the reminiscences given by Kunjuswami, and Bhagavan says, now you will say, when you are cutting vegetables, you will say that you should have been doing self-enquiry, and while doing self-enquiry in the hall, you will be thinking, oh, what is Bhagavan doing now, cutting vegetables, should I not go and help him, or something like that. So how to practice this is in detail, how to practice the holding of the self with our prarabdha having work entailed is detailed by Vasishtha Muni in the subsequent verses. But briefly, we can understand that the Dahara Vidya, the Atma Vicharam, is not denied to one whose body has the prarabdha of not being a sannyasi or having lots and lots of work to do. It doesn't matter at all because behind the prarabdha, Anganga Irund, the Ishvara remains in each of those places behind the ego and releases the vasanas according to which the ego has to act. So therefore, since the Ishvara is there and Ishvara's nature is the self, everyone goes to that same self in deep sleep where there is no mind. So everyone is eligible to do self-enquiry, is the teaching of Bhagavan, and that is the purpose of his birth, he says. To spread the Atma Jnana, to spread the Tanmaya Nishta, that the self alone is that Nishta, to spread that is why he has read. So we have seen basically the first part of the verse where the meditation on the Dahara Akasha is covered and where Bhagavan calls it as Ahattai Serku, to join or merge the I into the R. We have seen that part. The second part of the verse, Vayu Udukkamume, Vasanegal Udukkamume, Sarum Tane, that part let us briefly take up. Now, usually we have seen in Upadesha Saram as well as many a time in talks that pranayama is offered as a support to self-enquiry. Those who cannot or those who find the mind is very fast, Bhagavan suggests you can do pranayama or observe the breath, and when the breath quietens down, the mind also quietens down because both have the same source. Now that we have seen in Bhagavan's teachings. But here interestingly, the tables are turned. Vasishtha Muni turns the tables. He says, if you take the mind to the Ha, if you take the I to the R, there is an automatic subsidence of breath. The Kumbhaka, Kevala Kumbhaka is automatic, he says. How is that? The same rule as Bhagavan gives for in Upadesha Saram, that both of them, both the mind and the breath, have the same source, is what is the key. That since they have the same source, if one is taken to the source, the other also follows suit. Now, we see that in talk number 54, Bhagavan says that the breath is like the horse and the ego is like the rider of the horse. Therefore, in the path leading to pranayama as a support for self-enquiry, it is that when the horse is slowed, the rider's anxiety or the mind is also slowed down, is checked. That is what he says in talk number 54. If the horse is checked, the rider is checked. But now the tables are turned, that if the rider slows down in the mind or rider is checked, the horse is also automatically checked. We can understand that. But Bhagavan gives detailed information in talk number 154. How when the mind quietens, automatically the breath quietens. Why is this so important? It is very important from the point of view of yoga brashtata. Yoga brashtata means, see, with the current trend of directly teaching that no effort is required to come to the self, the problem is that the temporary stillness of thought, which I had myself referred to, that I had such a phase where I would have the experience of the thought-free state, but still the ego was surviving because it was a meditation on thought-free state. It was objective seeing of the thought-free state in my case. Therefore, there was that phase. And in that phase, what I did is very interesting. Is that whatever that teacher had told that these were not necessary, whenever I would find somebody doing it, I would go and condemn them. Why are you doing this? At least in some cases, not in, I didn't put up a mic and say this is wrong, that is wrong. But I wasted a lot of energy and disturbed people who were doing sadhana. That is yoga brashtata. Now, yoga brashtata means that the quietening of breath, the quietening of emotions, the quietening of mind and intellect have not yet been complete, and they are symbolic of your non-merger into the self. This one should be alert that even though one may have the thought-free state anubhava, if one does not get the breath subsidence and if the one does not get the vasana subsidence, then the avoidance has not happened. And this is a caution which we can practically take, because when we mistake that, we can check ourselves whether we are still having emotional disturbances, because emotional disturbances come with breath disturbances alongside. Whenever the emotions are high, either positively or negatively, the breath is not stable, it is disturbed. And that will be the indication that the breath has not subsided. So, breath not subsiding is non-avoidance. Therefore, the verse gives us a clue that when the mind has reached the source, the breath should be in Kevala Kumbhaka automatically. Now, Bhagavan gives the process, that is pranayama according to jnana is naham. I am not this thought. The thought arises, we let it go. I am not this thought is out breath is the breath going out. The who am I, koham, is the in breath. That thought is not I. Who am I is koham, and that is the inward turning of breath. And I am he, the stillness of the ego, the stillness of the I, where one merges into the consciousness that is still, the source. So I am he, soham, is Kevala Kumbhaka. So this is the jnana pranayama. He says that when prana is subtle, it becomes the mind. Or when the mind is coarse, it becomes the prana. So it is the same self which is manifesting in different layers and different ways. Therefore, one should be able to understand that when the subtle mind, for one not so advanced, so this is vichara, this vichara brings about the desired result. For one not so advanced as to engage in it, some meditation brings about suspension of breath and the mind ceases to be restless. Control of mind spontaneously affect control of breath. Rather, Kevala Kumbhaka, spontaneous retention of breath without attention to inhalation and exhalation results. Now, what is this Kevala Kumbhaka? It is as though we are in deep sleep. One is not ruffled at all by incoming and outgoing. In fact, as far as the breathing entity is concerned, the individuality is gone and one has merged into the common breath of all. The Kevala Kumbhaka. Now that becomes automatic. That means all the other koshas merging into the universal become automatic when the mind or the I is taken to the heart and one is abiding there. So in whatever layers it may be, the panchakoshas, all of them merge into the respective universal and there is a subsidence. So that is how the breath subsides automatically. When one takes the I to the heart, the breath subsides automatically. And how does vasana subside? How do the vasana kshaya happen? that is the reference, last point of reference. Sadhanaya Vadadegalodu Vayu Odukamume Saruntane. Vayu Odukam we have seen. When the eye is taken to the source, the breath quietens, one can see that the emotional disturbances have been completely subsided into the self. Because they are all connected. They are all connected with one another. Now we see the last portion. How do Vasana Kshaya happen? By taking the eye or the mind to the source. Because we can see that the mind is driven by the Vasana. That means the Vasana is subtler than the mind. Now, how can, using the mind, one can remove something subtler than this? We have seen earlier that there are psychological experiments which show that the conscious mind is actually pushed by the Vasanas. We have seen that the conscious thinking entity, through the activity of the brain, 500 milliseconds or 250 to 500 milliseconds before I am conscious of that thought, there is brain activity. That means the Vasanas are building up the necessary potential to get the thought in place. And then the thought drives the mind to think and tell. Now, how can something subtler than the thought be attacked by thought? And that is where Bhagavan says the eye thought, only when it is outward turned and goes behind other thoughts, then it is under the control of Vasanas. The Vasanas are driving it. But when it tries to be self-attentive, which is the nature of the self, self-attention is not the nature of the mind, which is mind is driven by Vasanas. Self-attention is the nature of the self. So the great ones, they leave us with the quality of the self. So try to see yourself or turn inward and go to the source. There what happens, since we are going to the nature of the self, the Vasanas are now put heat upon. There is the heat of consciousness, heat of tapas that is put on the Vasanas. And they rise up as thought. One more way, a simpler way perhaps, is there. Though I have not read it anywhere, practically speaking, there is one more way to understand how Vasanas are brought out. The ego itself, the I thought itself, is nothing but the residual impressions, the collection of residual impressions that are still to be burnt up. And Bhagavan's sadhana, instead of making the collection of residual impressions meditate on something else, puts the attention on that collection itself. The net result of whatever is pending, and it may be added to or deducted from, but the I itself, the ego itself, is the collection of residual impressions. If we take like that, when attention is put on that as who am I, then that I starts getting dismantled. When the attention is going on some other thought, then the Vasanas get strengthened. Whereas when that attention is turned by Bhagavan's grace and one puts it on oneself as who am I, then that the I, the ego, the false collection of conditionings, the false collection of the Vasanas starts getting dismantled, and one by one, the thoughts start coming out. And as the Vasana changes into thought, one can let it go. One can let it go and free oneself of that Vasana. And with the practice continuing, all the Vasanas are eliminated. In Who Am I, Bhagavan says, these are all the enemies in the fortress. The Vasanas are the enemies in the fortress. With great Vairagya, as the deep sea divers who tie stones in their waist and dive deep, one should have great Vairagya to let go of thought, to not pursue the thought, and to ask for whom is this thought and hold the eye. When one does this, then the enemies in the fortress start coming out. In another example, he says it is like setting fire to the forest to bring out all the animals, the wild animals. Let us say they are elements which are undesirable to be brought out, because that example may not be very contemporary, where we understand that the wild animals are to be protected. But we can say that it's an analogy which we can keep it at analogy level itself, that the thoughts are all driven out from inside when one puts self-attention. And that is how the Vayu would come Sarum Tane. Automatically, there is the subsidence of breath as well as vasanas. Now, we find that in Atma Vicharam, we have to do what Bhagavan's Sannidhi does for us. He did for many through the Nayana Diksha, through the Mauna Diksha, through the Diksha through words, that is through thought. All that Bhagavan has given us by his presence inside as the self, and by appearing in front of us as the teaching who am I. Now that who am I has to be held, and what Bhagavan did as removing of vasanas, by keeping one hand here and one hand here, he does that. And for many devotees, for instance, Papa Ramdas ji, what small amount of residual impressions he has, he comes and asks, I need your grace. He is a Rama Bhakta, and Bhagavan gives him a deep look, and in whatever happens there is beyond all kinds of thought processes. But whatever the eye, the residual impressions collection was there, it just goes and sinks into the heart. And Ramdas ji, from there the Ramanama becomes Akhanda. It is effortlessly going on. And Bhagavan says, when Nama is going on effortlessly, that is self-realization. That is one merging into the Dahara Akasha. That is what happens to Ramdas ji, with Bhagavan just looking. And if we take Chinmayananda ji's life, he writes that in Tapovan Maharaj's ashram, many years later, he gets self-realization. At that time, he remembers, he is given the memory that so many years back, when he came to Ramanasramam as a college student, very active, very much interested in politics and other things, he comes to Ramanasramam. The same experience of final abidance was given a glimpse by Bhagavan by just one look, says Chinmayananda ji in writing that experience. Now, what Bhagavan does through that, through the Spurana coming out through the eyes, through the body in Mauna, through his walk, we cannot describe, because the Spurana itself is beyond description. But Bhagavan has opened up that, that storehouse of wealth, the art, by giving us the sadhana, who am I? And by assuring us that he is present as the self within us. What we have to do is, whenever a thought arises, if we pursue it, we are building on the vasana. We let it go and put the attention on the I by asking for whom is this thought. That is the practice. What happens? The I is now stilled. We saw the difference between stilling of the I and the I meditating on something else, where it can claim something. So in who am I, it is directly stilled, and with repeated stilling of the I, the vasanas are all destroyed, and one is able to abide effortlessly in the Dahara Akasha as the self, as the Dahara Akasha itself. The Atman itself is the Dahara Akasha. The self alone is realized. Till such time, this practice has to be held. This practice of Atma Vicharam, which is called as meditating on the Dahara Akasha by Vasishtha Muni, without impinging on the greatness of those teachings, we can safely understand that this is the same heart and same space where Bhagavan is taking us, irrespective of our prarabdha, irrespective of what duties are there, to give us the source, the same space that Rama was taught by Vasishtha Muni, that great disciples have been taught by the great Munis earlier. He has opened up it for all. And Bhagavan is present as the Ramana Shakti to support us as the Ramaneshwara. We can rest assured that whenever we are we are not able to do sincerely, he comes. He comes as the Ramana Shakti and supports us. That is how all the sadhana that we have done gets validated in self-inquiry. We are clearly able to understand how Ishvara is there from the slightest of sadhanas we take up. We simply take up the sadhana of speaking truth. God is there. Truth, just speaking truth, it keeps us away from multiplicity and brings us to unity. Acting ethically, doing japa, doing dhyana, doing parayana. But all of them, it is so clear, has to finally come to the Dahara Akasha, the oneness with the self. And once we have come to self-inquiry, as we all have surely, we should stick to it. We can resort to the support of the surrender and practice of bhakti, but we should make self-inquiry as our pradhana sadhana, as the main sadhana, and the surrender also. When we see the difference between surrender and self-inquiry vanishes, that is when we are abiding in the self. Therefore, the surrender also becomes complete in self-inquiry. Self-inquiry becomes complete in surrender. We can't tell how we have come to the abundance. We have come to the abundance neither through self-inquiry nor through surrender, but because abundance is our nature. Abundance is all that there is. The self alone is. Therefore, one has to come to the self, irrespective of what way one takes. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in practice of Atmacharya for 10 minutes. Yavatma will set the time for us. Namo Ramanaka. Namo Ramanaka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining the self in all beings. Nandakumarji has taken us to the strengths of self-inquiry, as well as to the dangers of not being alert, which is the vigilance of self-inquiry. It's a holistic vigilance. It makes us aware of itself. Whereas in everything else, one may become aware. We may think being self-aware is, when I am aware of my thoughts, I am self-aware. A person had shared with me that she teaches her children to be self-aware. Not through self-inquiry, but generally she believes that being aware is very important. And she says, well, my children don't know, I do not know whether they know everything about themselves. But when they don't know something, they are aware that they don't know. That much of self-awareness they have. So it is there. That's a sadhana, which it's nothing to do with even meditation or anything, but it's an automatic sadhana. Some people want to be aware. Many people want to be aware. They would like to know, because knowledge is very, very powerful, So they would like to know about themselves. They would like to study. Sometimes I have seen advertisements or I have heard about studies regarding the unconscious mind, tapping the unconscious mind. All that, everything is fine. But what Bhagavan tells us is, with what? With what power are you doing this? With what power are you becoming aware? Which is the one which taps the unconscious mind? At a very simple level, I often find that we share with each other what to do. I want to drop all my thoughts. I want to abide in the self, or I don't want to be body dependent, but my ego doesn't allow me to do it. Now, who is saying my ego? Only in self-inquiry, the question will come, as if I and my ego are different, we will be talking. My ego doesn't allow me to do it. Then who is the I and who is the ego in that? Only when we ask ourselves, who am I? One goes to the root question. And in this verse, Bhagavan has very beautifully highlighted how the method of self-inquiry is that very crucial bridge. It is that crucial bridge. Bhagavan talks about it in Ulladu Narpadu as a Chitjara Granthi. It is that which binds the self with the body. But here today, we got the understanding that it binds the Sthula with the Karana. The Bhagavan has given us that link, which is the Sukshma. The Sukshma is that link between the Sthula and the Karana. Now, if we try to control only the Sthula, which we can do by controlling the breath, we will be controlling the Sthula body, of course. The body will get aligned when one controls breath, as in Hatha Yoga. And mind also to some extent, which is the emotions or the gross part of the mind, gross part of the conscious mind. That's what Nandakumarji pointed out today. There is, even in the conscious mind, there are two parts. There is a gross part and there is a subtle part. The gross part is something which is very visible to us. And the subtle part of the conscious mind, we can become conscious of it when we try to watch the mind. Even if we simply try to watch the mind, we will become conscious of subtle part of the mind. But we will not be conscious of the vasanas. We will not be conscious of the causal. So, and we can't get there also. It's not possible to tap that. So, it is called conscious, unconscious and subconscious. So, the unconscious is a link between or between the conscious and the subconscious, according to that definition. Here I would say that the mind or the aham vritti, which Bhagavan says is the center of the mind, is the bridge. So he has given us this very invaluable clue. That's what I understood from today's exposition of the verse, that by holding on to the I thought, the breath and the body and the gross emotions, the visible emotions are automatically taken care of, because this is subtler than that. Often Nandakumarji has told us that the subtler includes the gross. So when one goes to the senses, the world gets included. When one goes to the mind, the senses get included. To the prana, the senses get included. Then the mind, the prana gets included. So automatically it gets regulated. So the higher, go to the higher. So Bhagavan says go to the higher, or rather to the subtler, so that the gross automatically gets covered. This is a very, it has a twin advantage. One is that we need not spend any time on the gross, because time is our most precious commodity, very limited. We don't know how much we have. We don't even know whether we have 3 minutes. We may imagine we have some time, but it's very, very precious. That's why in those days we hear of people doing tapasya for thousands of years and for numberless janma. So Bhagavan is what he like he compressed mother's several janmas into that day. He is compressing all our anubhavas, and he is taking away some of them by implication. So we don't have to worry about the body, we don't have to worry about aligning the breath. It may or may not get aligned, but in case we are worried, we may not be worried if it remains unaligned also. But in case we are worried, Bhagavan says that's already taken care of. That's why he says in the Ramana Gita, he says, every desire of yours will already automatically get fulfilled. And he also says every klesha will go. Sarva klesha nivritti syat phalam atma vicharataha. So he has given that declaration that atma vichara will destroy all kleshas, all sorrows will go away. So that way we don't have to worry about the gross, we don't have to worry about the breath, and it will automatically get regulated and taken care of. When the breath gets regulated, automatically bodily functions will get regulated. They are all on account of the imbalance of the breath. That's what Hatha Yoga tells us. So it will automatically get taken care of. So we don't have to worry about that. And the gross emotions also get taken care of. Then what about the causal body, the vasana? And this is the bridge, because the vasanas, as Nandakumarji says, are there only for the I thought. So, since the vasanas also, although they are not in direct reach or available to the I thought for inspection, nonetheless, they are existing only for the purpose of sustenance of the I thought, of the jivahood. So, when we catch hold of that and question that, they don't remain meaningful any longer. In order to probably express that you may want me, they may appear. You needed me at one time, they may try to say. So they are appearing. And if we are continuing to hold to the I thought, then automatically they will dissolve. So Bhagavan gives a very, very significant bridge to us. And that is why he has used the word aham. Of course, the word aham is used in the Bhagavad Gita also to signify the mind. So the translators might have used it both ways, and Bhagavan's words are impeccable. So while not digressing from the original, and therefore using a word which can mean the same as the original, Bhagavan has added his own stamp over here by using the word aham and giving us the additional dimension, and it's for us to take it also. And we can take it because very often the revelation of the verse is for our own sadhana, isn't it? So mind means center of the mind. So Bhagavan has said aham over here. It's a very beautiful revelatory verse which has come to us, and at the peak of the sadhana verses, to say that this is the crux of the sadhana, this is the essence of the sadhana, and this is Bhagavan's contribution to all spiritual seekers for all times. So it's very blessed evening for us. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana.